lovely to see you all, and thanks very much for coming. So today I want to spend the next 40 minutes or so talking about decarbonising user journeys, which is relatively new talk. It's kind of a culmination of lots of thinking that I've been doing over the last year or so, trying to pull together some new ways of working to come up with a pragmatic and practical approach to try and do something about the problem that Kat alluded to and mentioned earlier. So I'm all about trying to kind of give people practical tools to kind of fix problems. So this is a prototype, if you like. It's quite early doors, and I'm really looking for people to give it a go and help me knock corners from it. So we'll treat this as a bit of a beta and a bit of a work in progress, but hopefully you find it useful. By way of introduction, I've been working in the field of UX since about 1998, looking for various UX agencies and government organisations and I guess private and public sector bodies over the last, 26 odd years or something like that. Up until recently, I was the UX director at CX Partners based down here in Bristol, and spent lots of my time, very much as a hands-on practitioner, really, doing all the kind of UX work I'm sure you're all doing, but more recently doing lots of service design work in the public sector. I took voluntary redundancy actually towards the end of last year. So since October, I've been in an interesting kind of maybe a liminal space. Maybe that's the right word. I don't know, really. Trying to work out what the hell I'm going to do next. And it's been a really useful time to take a bit of time out, think about what I'm interested in. And I've kind of very much found myself centering very much on this area around digital sustainability, which is a useful culmination of certainly interests and experience, having graduated as an environmental science graduate back in 1998 from Leeds Uni, which is something I never told anyone about because it never felt very relevant to my job as a UXer. And now all of a sudden it's come quite useful, which is remarkable. And it's always a fun game at work, isn't it, to talk about what degree did you do, and the weird and wonderful backgrounds that we've all come from as UXers is always a fun game in the office. So now it's kind of useful to have had that background and kind of pull it together with or bring it together with I guess my more recent work experience. So in terms of what I wanted to cover, I guess it's just talking about the fact that unbeknownst to most of us, I'm sure you're contributing to a big problem, which is quite a remarkable thought to have, really, given that I've always thought that we're the good guys, aren't we? We're the people who are thinking about the users and doing right by the users and making people's lives easier and spending time with them and empathizing and making their lives easier by making things easier for them. So I was really shocked to kind of discover more about the environmental impact of the internet. It really blew my mind last year to start reading things like this. The internet's responsible for more emissions than the aviation industry. Like, I was thinking, well, how could this possibly be the case? It's literally it's an invisible thing, or it feels ethereal, doesn't it? And it feels like, it's like, well, how can it have an impact? And it certainly feels that this is an area that lots of people within our industry, and I guess the general public, of course, and rightly so, could have no full understanding of or appreciation of. And possibly that's changing a bit with conversations around AI in terms of the kind of environmental impact of that, in terms of energy usage to kind of run those huge data centers. But I think this is news to lots of us, and it was certainly news to me up until relatively recently. Also, things like the internet as a country would be the sixth most polluting in the world. Again, it's mind blowing. It certainly made me kind of sit up and think as an environmental science graduate and as someone who thought, well, actually, I'm doing good in the world. It's like, well, blimey, maybe all of the stuff that I've been working on for such a long time is actually doing a lot more harm than I ever imagined. But of course, given this notion that digital feels like an ethereal thing, I mean, for many years, it was interesting reading or being privy to the business cases that felt they were the root of the reason why we were creating websites for people, sort of reflecting on my early career, where it seems remarkable now to think of the fact that we were designing people's first websites. It's like, didn't have a website. And a lot of the rationale for doing that often was people would talk about things like paper savings. Sometimes there was an environmental rationale for the reasons why we were doing these sorts of things. Particularly, actually, when I was working at the Environment Agency, I used to run the intranet there, and again, lots of the business cases were put together on environmental terms, of course, because that's what resonated with the organisation, without any consideration or appreciation for some of the environmental impacts of the things that we were commissioning and working on. But of course, digital is a physical thing, which again is a hard thing to grasp. I'm a UXer, I'm not a technical person. I don't really understand what happens behind the screen. It's like, how's this thing working? And what on earth is the infrastructure that's allowing us to do what we're doing now? It's very difficult to understand that, picture it and get an understanding of it. But of course, in reality, the infrastructure of the internet is enormous and hugely energy intensive in terms of both the transference of information, also the storage of data. And it's incredible if you've ever seen images of or seen videos of the kind of scale of these data centers. It absolutely blows your mind. And of course, they're only going to be getting bigger and expanding and expanding. So that's the first thing to consider. There's a huge physical footprint to produce and source and provide the power for these things, but also for the cooling of these things. Many are cooled, of course, by air conditioning or water cooled, and that's causing problems in terms of water resources in some areas. So there's lots going on in the background that's very difficult to have an appreciation of, but it's definitely happening. The Rosenfeld Media Group called Climate UX, which I kind of stumbled across by accident, like the LinkedIn algorithm served me up an invite, or you'd be aware of this group that's been running for a few years now, which is a real joy to find, because I felt like I was ploughing my own furrow here. It was like, I'm a UXer, but I'm interested in this stuff. And I've come across all the sustainable UX resources, but I haven't really met many people who felt like they were my tribe, really, doing similar things to me. But it turns out, of course, that when you start looking for these things, you find that there are thousands of people doing exactly this. And the Climate UX group is fantastic. And I'd encourage you all to go along to some of these talks, because they've been running for a long time. And Lee Rosenfeld has a thing called the Rosenverse, which is like a community that you can join and get access to the recordings of those. So do check those out. I went to a talk recently by Tristan Aldani, and she was talking about the upcoming, I think at that time, this possibly back in January, when TikTok was switched off for a day. I think it was something to do with Trump. I can't remember. It was some sort of policy thing. Sorry, I forget the detail. But anyway, they switched TikTok off for a day. And it was remarkable to understand the positive impact of it being switched off. And it's astonishing looking at the kind of usage of TikTok. In the US alone, the average citizen is spending 60 minutes a day on TikTok. What are we all doing? Isn't it bonkers? So 60 minutes a day, but there's 150 million people spending 60 minutes per day using the service. And Tristan had done the numbers and worked out some of the energy savings or carbon emission in relation to that usage. And the service being switched off for a day was as if we didn't power 3.4 million homes. The one that blew my mind here, going back to the aviation thing, is if we didn't take 1,750 round-trip flights from New York to London Heathrow. I mean, it's astonishing, but it's one day, and that's just in America. So you multiply that by global usage, and it's really quite mind-blowing what's going on. And again, this is just one service. So multiply that across Snapchat, YouTube, everything else that's Instagram, you name it, off you go. So it gives you a sense of the potential numbers we're talking about here. But of course, the problem with all of this is there's lots of talk, there's lots of chat, there's lots of talk, chat, but potentially not a lot of action. And I love this image, politicians discussing climate change as the levels just slowly rise above their heads. I think this image is a brilliant kind of encapsulation of the situation. I think there's lots of reasons why this happened. And I think one of the reasons why this happens is it's quite overwhelming, isn't it? It's a bit of an existential crisis, isn't it? The climate crisis. It's massive. It's affecting all of us. It's huge. It's hard to understand the nuts and bolts of it. The language that's used to describe it is confusing and complicated, and it's easy to feel like, well, what the hell can I do? How can I make a difference? You know, this is all too much to comprehend, really. Which again is something that I'm trying to attack square on. What can we do? We can all do something. We can all do our bit and make a positive change. And really, as responsible professionals, we've got a job to do here. This is a bit of a call to action and a call to arms that we have to do something. We have to make a change. And I think this kind of notion of being responsible professionals is hugely important. And I've seen more and more people recently talk about themselves, even on their LinkedIn profiles. I'm a responsible designer. And that's an interesting thing, isn't it? In terms of not just from a sustainability point of view, but having an acknowledgement of the potential impact of our work on society and on the economy. There's a lot to be said for that in terms of making deliberate choices, not using manipulative patterns, thinking about the unintended consequences of the services or the user experiences that we're designing. Because if we don't think about it, then who's going to think about it? We have a huge privilege, I think, in terms of the job we do, because we do get to design a future, but then I guess with power comes responsibility, and we need to think about that in a responsible way. So I think we have to do something about it. But what do we do? So this was exciting. Today I noticed, and this may have not happened today, but look at number 11. In some ways, I don't like the fact there's no longer 10. I liked it when there were 10, but there's an 11th, but it's a good one. So GDS have added an additional design principle, and hats off to the team for doing that, because I imagine it's not an easy thing to do to kind of get these things through and make them happen. But the really grail of design principles, of course, the GDS principles that are much lauded, and rightly so, and have really set a pattern for the way in which these things are put together, and hugely useful along with a kind of service manual. That stuff is just, I think, it's some of the most useful resources I've had, and is a constant source of inspiration and a reference point for work that I've been doing certainly over the last few years, working on government services. But they've added a principle about minimising environmental impact, and it's great that this is happening because it gives us a reference point to say it's not just me talking about this. This is the government is starting to talk about this and almost like mandate it. So you don't have to feel like, I think sometimes with these sorts of issues, it can feel like you're your own voice on a project team, and it's not always an easy topic to broach in terms of, here's another thing we've got to think about, because let's face it, our work's hard enough. It's hard being a UXer and a service designer. And there's so much stuff to think about. And here we go. There's me sort of saying, oh, now you've got to worry about sustainability. It's, oh, thanks very much. It's like, we're already struggling, and it's not an easy thing to do. But I feel with this, legislation's coming. That's going to be the thing that kind of encourages people to act in the way that we need to be acting. But that's going to be useful because it's something we can point towards. Much as with accessibility, it's useful to have legislation as a reason to encourage action. It's like, well, you have to do this. This is a legal consideration. So I wonder how long it will be until there's some kind of similar kind of legal pressure behind this sort of stuff as well. You face it, it's coming, and it's all going to be useful. So let's on the front foot before that comes. So well and good, there's the case for doing it, but how on earth should you do this stuff, given how possibly overwhelming it can feel to do it? I wanted to share a bit of a project story, just to, I guess, give a bit of context about, I guess, how I came to be thinking about these sorts of things. And I found myself thinking a lot about sustainability last year, having gone to a service design. If you're ever in Bristol, come along to a service design Bristol meetup. It's a lovely group of people. And a chap called Ned Gartside from Defra did a talk about sustainability across services, really. So it wasn't just a digital thing, but he was talking about the sustainability guidelines, which again is something I didn't know they existed. I was like, wow, this is a revelation. This is interesting. And so I kind of had that in my head and went off on a bit of a mad set of hobby projects, just kind of investigating those and learning about those. So I had it kind of in my head somewhere. But at the time, we were CX Design and built Talk to Frank, which is a government advice, a drug advice website. So aimed at youngsters, really, with an aim to kind of reduce harm. So it's not saying don't do it. It's saying be informed, essentially. And this is a really, really well designed site. It's super easy to use. It's very simple. The content design on it is fantastic. And so it's designed to be quick and easy to use, and actually kind of performs brilliantly from a kind of organic search point of view. So when we were kind of asked to try and optimize it, it was a tricky one in a way, because you think, well, actually, this is already working quite well, but I wonder if can we make it go faster? And the case study was, imagine a teenager in the stone circle at Glastonbury with a dodgy 3G network connection, possibly having inherited their mum's old iPhone or something. So they've got a dodgy handset. They're just about to do something they probably shouldn't, but they're going to do it anyway. So let's make sure we can get the right information to them to help them make an informed decision. So that was a use case, but it did make me think about, that's not uncommon, is it, in terms of, I guess, the digitally excluded. You're all working on modern services, digital services, and often there's an assumption that people have got the latest handsets and have got good network connections, which of course isn't true. It's right, is it? And so there's a huge danger that people are excluded from the services we're designing. Anyway, so we set about doing some work to kind of get under the hood of this website and optimize it. And I had a developer who was using a suite of tools to do that, of which was kind of Google Lighthouse. So getting under the bonnet, getting some reports about the kind of performance of the site and trying to kind of fine tune it. So the approach was a bit like the kind of the marginal gains thing. So can we shave a bit off here? Can we shave a bit off there? Can we optimize this and make this thing go faster? And it was actually remarkable. We worked at a specific journey. It was like homepage to results page to product page. So it was a fairly simple journey. And through the work that the developer had done, you had these brilliant improvements. You were able to reduce the page weights by 80%. Turned out the information was served by 30% faster. But what we also found is that the carbon footprint of the site or that journey had been reduced by 80%, which we never meant to do. Like it wasn't even part of the conversation. It was just like, I think Andy said to me something like, oh, and by the way, it's one of those sort of conversations. And I was like, really? That's interesting. Like how come so many good things have happened from like a relatively short, sharp piece of work? It was amazing. But it did lead to a bit of a revelation in terms of, well, hold on. So we've made it better for the users because they can access the service in the middle of nowhere and they're getting the service faster and quicker. And so they're getting the information they need. The performance of the site is improved. So that's a good thing. So that's good for both users and the business. I mean, it was a UK government client, so they're not a business. You know what I mean? The organisation who commissioned the site or ran the site were winning because they were offering a better performance. So if it was an e-commerce client, they'd be super excited about performance. I mean, to be honest, you'd hope that everyone's excited about performance. The planet was benefiting because we had a footprint. The prosperity of the organisation. So sometimes when you see this kind of triple bottom line, which is, I'm riffing on the triple bottom line here, of course, but often this is profit. But for public sector organisations, the profit's not the focus. So we were helping the prosperity of the organisation by helping them to achieve their mission of keeping people safe from harm. So I appreciate there's lots of P's flying around, but it's just like, hold on a minute, this is I've never seen anything that's kind of had so many benefits across different spectrums, if you like, or different factors. And the final one being purpose. And by that, I mean the kind of, I felt by doing this work, it made the work feel purposeful. It made me feel motivated. And that's hugely important, of course, within our jobs. If we don't feel like we're doing something worthwhile, how do you do a good job? How do you jump out of bed in the morning and think, I can't wait to get to work and work on this evil service that's going to bring about end of this, that, and the other. And I'm sure we've all worked on projects where we're like, I'd really rather not be doing this. I don't feel this doesn't quite align with my values. I don't feel very good about this. And so I found that hugely motivating in terms of I can do something that's having these benefits. And of course, within some projects, the focus of the work is that some of these things will be more important than others. There's always a commercial objective, isn't there? There's often a performance objective. So good to have these other benefits as well. So that got me excited. This was like a bit of a eureka moment that actually we can do stuff that's good for the environment, but so it's good for people, it's good for profit, it's good for all these other things. So there's something in this. And I guess this kind of mentions one of the key books that I've read that's found hugely useful. So I'd definitely recommend you all rush out and buy Sustainable Web Design by Tom Greenwood. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was so easy to read. It really helped me understand the issues. Some of the kind of more technical stuff in the background was brilliantly explained. And within it, Tom talks about these kind of key principles, things that are kind of good indicators of carbon emissions. I think they've been described to me as, and I think there's some conjecture here as well, but it's like they're probably the closest we've got. They're a good proxy, kind of an indicator for carbon emission around really focusing on reducing data transfer. So that's where that kind of performance thing comes in, making sure we're minimizing page weights of individual pages that we're working on, reducing the amount of data that's being transferred, but also fundamentally to make sure that the carbon intensity of the electricity that's used to power these things and host sites is really kind of focusing on green energy. So making sure that we're using the right hosting providers, if you like, to do that. And those really felt like two key things. So if you're using the right kind of hosting as well as minimizing the amount of data that's flying around, that's really the secret to doing these things. Which I was thinking, well, this is all good because as UXers, we've talked about minimizing page weights before. We talked about, certainly in the early days when we first started designing for mobile. That was interesting, wasn't it? Because it's like, well, crikey, we've got some constraints here. We've got a skinny little screen, so we've got to be pragmatic about what we try and send to people. And also because of, I guess, networks and things, again, we haven't got the luxury of super fast networks. So of course, in recent times, we're spoiled, aren't we? Everyone's got super fast connections, not everyone, or the assumption is people can access these things. And there's so much extra stuff that's thrown at people that's unnecessary, but is served because we have the luxury of that. So something interesting there about thinking back to that kind of thing. We think when people talk about mobile first, I think that's a useful mindset to kind of adopt. It's like, yeah, that was good, wasn't it? Because we really thought hard about what are the fundamentals I need to communicate to someone? What's the order of those things? How should they be served? And doing it in such a way to make sure that we can get the information to people, much as with that Talk to Frank example. So there's some more stuff. Again, where on earth do you start? How could you start using these principles tomorrow in your job? How could you start tactically bringing them into projects in a way that will enable you to feel like you can make a difference within the constraints you're already working to? So here's a tangent. Last year, I've always fancied designing a tent. I don't know if you folks enjoy doing random design things, but I thought it would be cool to like design your own tent. I love camping and wild camping and stuff. I thought it'd be a good little project to design a tent and kip out in the garden with my kids. And so I started playing around with different ideas and then went into a YouTube wormhole around geodesic domes. I don't know if anyone else, I got very excited about geodesic domes last year and came across a chap called Bucky Fuller who was one of the, I don't know if he was the inventor of geodesic domes. I've read some competing arguments around those sorts of things, but he was an American visionary, really, like an absolute, a real design visionary. And interesting, I just started to hear lots of references to him. And I think it's always interesting when you hear people talk about people like Stuart Brand or any of these kind of, think of your design heroes. I thought, well, isn't it interesting then to look at, I wonder who their design heroes were? Who were the people that influenced the kind of OGs? Bucky Fuller is someone who's definitely cited on those terms. And interesting to kind of dig into a bit of his philosophy and his reading and writing. And again, there's loads of great videos on YouTube that I'd encourage you to check out. But it turns out he was a bit of a visionary in terms of kind of sustainable thinking as well. And some of the things that he talks about are this idea of like providing maximum value from the minimum amount of energy. And that's a good thing to kind of steal, if you like, and apply it to the context of the work that we do as, I guess, a fundamental principle. And think, well, that's the ultimate goal. This is what this thing should be all about. How can we provide maximum output or maximum value from the minimum input? It's an interesting thing to think about. And thinking about that in kind of the context of digital service, we know it's going to require energy to kind of drive this service, but the game here, if you like, is to minimize that, but also to minimize the human energy that's required to use these services. For a long time, we've been talking about this from a usability point of view. It's like, remember Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug, one of the fundamental books, a fantastic book that's all about why is it so hard to do the thing that I need to do, that you're asking me to do? Why am I having to expend so much mental energy to do what should be a very simple thing? I'm trying to buy a cinema ticket. I'm not trying to get into Mensa or something. It's like, why are these things so hard? So interesting to think about this idea of energy, not just in terms of neutrons or however energy is constructed, but also in terms of human energy and thinking energy. And that feels like familiar ground for us in terms of the way in which we work as a profession. But in terms of those as inputs, then how can we provide the most amount of value to the users that we're serving by the smallest possible input of energy? So really this is kind of how I'm picturing, this is the game. This is the thing we're trying to do. But of course, if you were to look across the digital estate, for want of a better description of, I guess, the organization you're working for or within at the minute, it's bonkers, isn't it? It's so complex. It's so huge. So you think, well, where would I even start? If I'm going to start decarbonize or to kind of implement some of these ideas, where would you begin and how would you do it in a pragmatic way? And of course, trying to do everything is impossible and everything would fall apart, and no one's going to let you try and do it everywhere anyway, because it's just not practical. So it's too overwhelming, and this is all about trying to reduce the overwhelm. So in terms of what feels like a more sustainable approach, and again, to steal the language of sustainability, is like this idea of think global. So have an appreciation for what's going on a global level and understand the big picture, but act local, do your bit, make the changes that you can, cultivate your own back garden. All of these things, these kind of well-worn principles are perfectly applicable here. So do what you can within somewhere that you can control. Everyone does their bit and we'll progress, we'll make a change. So, and again, this is the focus of where you do it. And this is the idea. So minimize the carbon footprint of your highest value user journey. Don't try and do your entire website, just identify what feels like the highest value user journey and get to work to try and improve that in any way, shape or form you can. So this is the kind of scope of where I'm focusing. And again, this feels familiar. As a profession, we're used to talking about user journeys across services or across just digital touch points. And I've been a bit deliberate in terms of focusing this stuff on digital, partly because it's easier to manage, but partly, to be honest, it's like I've got some ideas. I can kind of see this thing in my head. I'm going to start small. Again, start on user journeys, start on digital journeys, but there's no reason why this thinking couldn't be applied across a service journey with both digital and non-digital touch points. It's the same difference, isn't it? We talk about service journeys, we talk about digital journeys, user journeys, same difference in my mind. And then I like this idea of journeys, this kind of metaphor of journeys as well, because when we talk about, we're kind of very with this idea of physical journeys having a carbon footprint. If I drive to Glasgow, it would take me ages, but it's going to have a carbon footprint. Let's say it's that big. If I choose to go to Bristol Airport and fly, then the carbon footprint is going to be massively different and hugely larger. So this idea of journeys felt like a useful metaphor because, again, it's a user journey, it's a physical journey that has a footprint. But of course, digital journeys have footprints too. To the example of Snapchat, depending on how we're designing and building these things, we're going to have an impact from a carbon point of view or carbon footprint point of view. And that's going to vary at different stages of the journey. So let's imagine a simple journey. It's a hypothetical journey. Again, because of the way that these pages have been designed and built, they will have a different footprint. So how can we kind of visualize this and how can we measure these things and systematically go about decarbonising and reducing the carbon footprint of these different elements of the journey? And that's really what this is all about. So here's a process to follow to try this out. And again, this is something that I'm really keen to, I guess that's why I'm doing this. It's like, here's an idea. it's not fully formed, but it feels like it's got legs. Try it out. Give it a go. Tell me why. Tell me where it works. Tell me where it doesn't work. Let's kind of pile in on this. I guess it'll work to try and make a difference. But it's not fully thought through or fully featured, but it feels like a pragmatic way of actually doing something about the situation. And now that GDS have given us the permission, if you like, it's great because they're saying, go and do this thing. So hopefully this is a way that will help people to actually, I guess, follow those instructions and start to kind of put them into action. So step one, identify your highest value user journey. So obviously highest value is deliberately vague because if you're an e-commerce company, that might be, let's say, for example, that might be the journey that makes you the most money. If you're a government organisation that's, say, issuing driving licenses, it might be the journey that people use to apply for driving licenses. It's the reason you exist as an organisation. Or it might be a journey that kind of reflects your highest traffic from a user point of view. Who knows? Doesn't matter. I'm sure you've all got something popping in your heads at the minute. It's like, oh yeah, I think we'd probably start there. That would be a sensible place to start because of X, Y, Z reason. So identify the journey. Also agree internally why you're doing this. What's the reason you're setting about doing this? Is it because your product or your service is really bad in terms of environmental performance? Is it because sustainability is one of your organizational values and you want to make sure that you're being consistent across your entire service provision to make sure that you're doing things in the most sustainable way? What's that reason? Maybe your organization's been criticized in the past for poor environmental performance, so you want to make sure you're reversing that, doing things in the right way. So who knows, whatever it might be, but get aligned on what that is, identify that journey, and then benchmark your footprint. The joy of this, particularly from a digital point of view, is that there are lots of tools that allow you to benchmark where you are. And I've really enjoyed this because I found it really difficult to try and benchmark like a user experience. It's really hard, isn't it? And it's really hard to put numbers against these things. But people are very keen to do that because they want to be able to kind of quantify the benefit of the work and justify the work that's happened. And that's hard from a UX point of view. But it's much easier to put some numbers against these things in a digital context anyway, at least to get a sense of where things are. And again, lots of these tools are emergent, but there's lots that you can use. And I like the idea of playing around with like visual formats for benchmarking a footprint. I thought this really feels like you're used to creating service blueprints and user journey maps and customer journey maps. And we're good at mapping, aren't we? That is a thing that we like as a profession. We're all about that, visualizing complexity and making it easy to understand. And I thought, well, I wonder how we can do that from a carbon footprint point of view across a different journey, because it felt like something that lent itself to a visual format. So I was sort of playing around with some ideas, and again, this isn't a final version, but I struggle with carbon. It's like this emits 75 kilos of carbon. It's like, what do you mean? Like, is that good? Is that bad? Like, people don't think in terms of carbon. You walk up to someone in the high street and say, the website you used the other day, you realise that emitted 1.6 grams of carbon. And they're like, well, and so what? This doesn't mean anything, does it? So playing around with ideas of conveying this information in different ways. And actually, one of the website Carbon Calculator uses this kind of metaphor, this kind of carbon efficiency or the carbon rating that you might see on a fridge. If you buy a fridge or a dishwasher or a white good, they all come with this labelling. And you think, well, maybe that's something that we can steal in terms of representing the performance from a website performance, because again, it will resonate with people because it's something they're familiar with. So you're good at reusing things. We're good at design patterns, aren't we? And maybe this is a pattern that we can reuse. And also it's kind of deliberately provocative. I think the job that we need to do is to encourage stakeholders to understand how good or bad things are very quickly. You might have to read dense reports and see, oh, hold on, what's going on with our homepage? That's what you want the C-suite member in the meeting to kind of pick up on, or these are deliberate plans to kind of, this is the score we're at, and yeah, it's not very good, is it? And gives them kind of an impetus to do something about it. So this was like an early manifestation of the thing that I came up with in probably December, January time, and I've subsequently been doing a bit more work about playing around within different contexts and thinking about how else you could present this data. And again, this is just something else that I've been playing around with in terms of using different tools. So there's loads of tools available you could use, and I think I've got a list of them somewhere. I'll share them actually in a link in a bit. I've been playing around with Google Lighthouse. So again, great, it's a free tool. You can stick a little thing in your browser, very quickly give you a sense of performance data, desktop performance, mobile performance, gives you a really good to-do list. That was a thing we used actually as part of that Talk to Frank work. And again, it gives you numbers, and numbers are, They're useful, aren't they? Because it makes people stand up, look, like, oh, well, hold on, that's not very good, or we're doing okay, but there's room for improvement. And none of this is perfect and precise, but at least it's indicative enough to kind of give you a sense of where you are. So playing around with other tools, website carbon calculator is another great one. That does a nice job of visualizing the carbon rating, as well as giving a sense of, like, it'll tell you whether something's hosted using renewable energy and, or amongst other things as well, and helps you work out. A big thing around this is your usage data as well. So if you've got a sense of, like, you should be able to access that through analytics. If you've got a sense of how frequently, or the usage data of the pages, you can plug that data in as well and get a true sense of what the impact is or the footprint is over time periods. So you might be per month or per year or whatever's relevant to you. EcoGrade is another good tool that I've been using. So that's by a company called Mighty Bytes, who are over in the States. And I really like the way they kind of break down their results. It gives loads of practical advice around different kind of, gives you scores around kind of UX design, and gives you a to-do list of stuff to do. So again, it's all good stuff. It's like, oh, thanks, it's useful. I've got a number and you're helping me do something about it. So it's been fun playing with these tools. Some of them a bit glitchy, as you'd imagine, and you can go crazy with this stuff as well. I mean, there's loads of tools available. Another one I've been playing around with is Cardamom, and that's a really good tool that gives you both kind of data about what's happening on the front end, but as well as the back end as well. And having spoken to lots of people about this stuff who know far more about it than I do, there's some really encouraging conversations happening around Cardamom. So yeah, another tool to check out. And again, there's many more as well. So you can pull this stuff together in a format that suits your audience. This is a bit data heavy. It might work for some, it might work for others, but I love the way that it gives you, it's quite provocative, isn't it? And also, I think, give yourself a couple of hours, make yourself a cup of tea and stick some music on. And it's a bit arduous pulling this stuff together, but it doesn't take too long. And again, you've got a basis to work from. So you've done your benchmarking, you've got a sense of how good or not your different stages in your journey are, and then set some benchmarks, set some targets, sorry. So you can say, well, actually, we're here and we'd like to get to there within this period of time. So again, very, very useful in terms of, this is what we like at work, isn't it? We like to be able to measure things. We like to be able to set targets, to give ourselves some constraints and some timescales and a target to aim for. So set some targets, give yourself something to work towards, and then set about decarbonising. So how do you then act upon those targets and move things in the right direction? And there's lots of stuff you can do. I mean, I mentioned the tools, the outputs that some of the tooling gives you. Google Lighthouse gives you a great to-do list, quite technical. So this might be something your development friends or your dev friends can get on with. And again, tools like EcoGrade give you a great to-do list as well. There's not just dev stuff, I guess it's across the board. So there's a useful to-do list here. Also, Lighthouse gives you a list of stuff that you're doing well, which is important as well, isn't it? It's like, don't just change this stuff. Make sure you don't change the stuff you're doing well. And the other bit that I forgot to mention here is, I think within the benchmarking phase, it's really important to make sure you've got a good sense of what your user needs are across that journey, because there's no point in diving under the hood here and removing a load of stuff and fine-tuning a load of stuff and removing a load of stuff if we break the user's ability to do the job they need to do. Like, that would be a really bad thing for a bunch of UXers to do. So understand your user journey from a carbon footprint point of view, but also benchmark it from a usability point of view as well. How well is it serving people to do the things they need to do, and how make sure those things are, because again, you want to make sure you're not fixing one problem but then creating another problem by virtue of doing that. Oh yeah, coming back to the web sustainability guidelines. So this is an incredible document, an incredible piece of work that the team have done to produce this. And this is now part of the W3C suite of documents. So it's in familiar W3C format, if you're familiar with Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So it's quite overwhelming. I think there's a bit of a problem with the W3C stuff in terms of just the format of it. It's a bit overwhelming. I find it overwhelming anyway. There's a lot of stuff, and it's hugely but it's full of gold. It's full of gold. So this really gives you an amazing to-do list of stuff that you can do and work on. I've been hanging out in the user experience design section of it, because it's the bit that I know best, I know most, compared to some sections on the more development side of things or product management side of things, which again is a bit more familiar territory for me. But it does give you a nice to-do list, and it will say, much as this one talking about images, it gives you a set of success criteria. So work through those as a to-do list. Imagine that was something that you had identified within some of your valuation. You've got really maybe excessive page weights or whatever it may be, and the tools will tell you that it's probably down to your images, or again, it's the way of kind of these things out. So you can use these guidelines as a checklist or a to-do list to help you to fix that problem. So again, it's It's a great resource. I think it's work in progress, so getting better all the time, which is a fantastic thing. So go and have a dabble in there. The thing I found at a glance versions of it, which I really like because they've just turned those guidelines into kind of almost plain sentence, plain English paragraphs. So, and usefully, there's a section on journey design. So it's like, okay, we're doing user journey. So, okay, so it just tells you what you need to do, and then obviously links off to the relevant guidelines to give you the detail as to what you might want to do to fix those things. So specifically around journeys, you could go through 1, 2, 3 within journey design, but obviously the 1, 2, 3 within content and assets are all relevant to your journey stuff as well. So you can be quite systematic about it. You can actually use the guidelines as almost like a decarbonisation, like a management tool, really. And I've had a play with pulling those into different formats, like did an Excel set that enables you to kind of slice and dice these by, okay, show me all the UX guidelines that are high impact and low effort. Brilliant. And in a way of just kind of chopping out all of the noise, because I think it's about 96 of these guidelines, so it's a bit overwhelming. And also we had a play with producing a Notion board, like a management tool as well. So you could decide what you're going to work on and then keep a bit of a list of what your progress is, how you're getting on. So you've got some, I guess, evidence and proof of your sustainability efforts, which is hugely valuable, I think. Oh, the other thing, I wrote this recently, it's a link to anything. So snap away on the QR code and that'll take you through to this, which is I had a crack at going through the web sustainability guidelines and trying to pick out some themes. Because again, it's like, this is quite overwhelming. There's a lot of stuff here. But actually, when you look through it, there's lots of crossover with accessibility best practice, user experience best practice. It's like, which again is all good, because I was a bit like, crikey, this sustainability stuff it's all new. But actually, when you start looking through it, it's like, oh, hold on, this is quite familiar with things that I've been reading about and learning about from a UX perspective for years. Less is more, the best design is the smallest design as possible. All these things, these kind of mantras that we've learned about for a long time. There's a lot of crossover. So that's good because it makes it familiar, which again makes it easier to kind of adopt. So I had a go at kind of trying to boil these down and write something that was hopefully useful and talks about these themes. So sort your hosting out, but then again, focus on creating the best possible user experience. Well, we know how to do that. We're good at that because of the job we do. And then making things as simple as lightweight as possible, again, gives you a set of things that you could do within the article to help you to do that. And again, use it as a to-do list. And the final one's around focusing on doing more good than harm. So if we're sustainable, we're doing no harm, which feels like that's not enough. You need to be moving to be this idea of being regenerative. So we need to be kind of creating more good than harm. How can we do that within our designs or the outcomes of the services we're designing? How can we make sure that they're having positive social value? Which feels like that's the next frontier. Let's get to sustainable. Even that's not an easy thing to do, but that's what we should be aspiring to. And we're doing. I better stop talking a minute. So I'll just mention a few principles that I found useful to think about in terms of bearing in mind, like what kind of mindset to adopt. So start small, because otherwise it's too overwhelming, but do start. That's the rule. Make sure you do something. Doing over talking, this is a good image to keep in the back of your mind as well. So it's all well and good talking about these things. And maybe within the organisations you work within, it's not a case of persuading people. This is of course it's the right thing to do. This is an easy conversation to have, but let's get doing stuff and stop talking. Again, this is a useful one, this idea of progress over perfection. The things we work on are never finished. That's an important thing to be very kind of aware of, and I'm sure we all are. So it's all about making changes and accepting things will never be perfect, but don't see that as the reason to not start. And also going back to that Bucky Fuller quote, this is all about providing maximum value from the minimum amount of energy. So think about that when you're looking at individual pages, like, what's the job of this page? What should it be doing? What job is that element doing? Is there anything here that's taking a bit of a free ride, that's not providing any value, that really we can kind of get rid of? And being quite rigorous about that, I think, is a useful mindset to adopt. I'll skip over these because I think I've made the point. But there's some useful things that you can get from some of the tools. So this was a screenshot I grabbed from website Carbon Calculator that might be a useful thing just to kind of pass under the noses of the relevant people at work to say, did you realise? Because it's quite provocative, isn't it? It's like, do you realise that the average is here and we're all the way down here? And it's, oh, that's interesting. And all you've done is put a URL into a carbon calculator and you've got something that might be the useful seed of a conversation that might get people thinking about this in a different way. And it's interesting to kind of understand what pushes people's buttons, isn't it, internally, in terms of like, well, that's not good enough. We need to, or where are our competitors? What, they're at a C? Right. I mean, it's like those things can be quite helpful. In terms of resources, gosh, there's a lot, but I pulled a few out. The management tool, and Kat, can we share the slides somehow afterwards so people can click on these links? I've got some cool. Okay, we'll do that. Yeah. So awesome. So that's just a screenshot of the Notion-based tool that I mentioned earlier. Sustainablewebdesign.org is a really fantastic resource that's been put together. I think that's Mighty Bytes and Whole Grain Digital, who are another kind of pioneer. That's where I think it's Tom Greenwood's company, actually based in London, absolute pioneers and are really leading the way and leading the charge with all of this stuff. So that's a great site because it makes it easier to kind of understand those guidelines and work through them. The guidelines I mentioned, calculators there. Again, there's many other tools you can use. Some great books, and again, the kind of the literature is growing, ever growing on this topic, as you'd imagine. I think Tom's just issued a second. I think the List Apart version went out of print, and he's issued a second edition that you can get through his website. So Google it up. But there's some fantastic resources, and I found these great books to kind of introduce myself to lots of these topics, and they're easy to read and very well written from kind of familiar authors that I'm sure you're familiar with. This is an annotated version of this talk, but actually the one I've just shared is a bit more up to date. So maybe, Kat, if we can share it to the folks, then it'll be more useful, but feel free. I've annotated this. So if you have been cooking your son's dinner or your daughter's dinner or whatever it is or having a pint or whatever, then the annotations may help to kind of explain some of the points. But again, we'll share another version at a later date. And also, I appreciate it. This may feel overwhelming. I'm here to help. Can help in lots of different ways, either kind of coach your organisation through this process, come in and give talks, do some of the decarbonisation work. Here to help. So do reach out on LinkedIn or whatever's the easiest way of whatever tools you're using. I'm always up for a chat. I'm absolutely loving learning about all this stuff at the minute and learning so much from peers in the area. So that's it. Thank you very much.